Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can find at theoryofdfs.com. This week, brought on the I would say the fantasy baseball goat, right? All around, Dave Potts. Cheese is good. You may have seen him in the DFS streets. You're one of the Dave. You're one of the select few that has ever won $1 million in a contest twice.
Yeah, I did it kind of back before it was a thing, before it was $1 million every week to someone in something. Pretty soon, there's going to be thousands of us. There's
I want
every,
to be the. I want to be. Hey, I want to be the. I want to. I want to get one first.
yeah, I mean, you do have to start there, but what you'll find is you get one, and then this time of year, tax time rolls around, and you're like, well, I really only have half a million, so I'm gonna have to do that again.
But me and you are I think are old school. People may view me. It's kind of weird in the DFS space that I'm the guy that's like that embraces variance like there's no tomorrow. Like, I think me and you are have similar backgrounds, but maybe have different philosophies in playing DFS. That like from a day to day basis, my attitude is anything could happen. So just exploit what the overconfidence in the market. But we both come from I remember. I think you're a little bit older than me, but I played very young rotisserie baseball. I played like old school, like the
Before the
transactions.
internet.
Pre internet, where the only reason why transactions were done on Tuesdays is because that's the day when the USA Today came out, and like every week they'd always have like all the weekly stats in the
Yeah, and
USA
you either
Today.
had to phone in or mail in your changes. Yeah.
Right, you had to phone in. There was a secretary that you had an answering machine, and then they weren't allowed to check the messages until like 1 in the morning, like Wednesday 1 in the morning, and that's when like all the waivers and all the fab bids, if you even had fab bids. I don't know,
Yeah.
Dave. I the only reason I don't play. Oh, there's two reasons I don't play fantasy rotisserie baseball anymore. Is one, uh, it's not worth the monetary hold. Like, you get a
Mm.
lot more churn of your money in DFS than you can in season long. But I got to a certain age, and most people did not want to play the way that I wanted to play. Like, it got to be very hard to find leagues where you're playing one. Like, I like playing 12-team NL only, 25-man rosters, auction
Yeah.
draft, 12-man reserve squad, 6-man minor league. Like the deep of the deep, where like waivers was like, are you going to get the platoon hitter for 3 at bats the next week? And the fab was kind of like trading deadline. Who's coming in from the American League? Like, I'm going to bid $78 because what the fuck else are you spending your fab on? Because there's no one available.
Yeah,
Do
those.
you come from that era of rotisserie baseball?
Yeah, and like you said, the industry has totally gone away from that. I mean, there's still a few of those, but they're mostly private leagues now, and like a 10-team mixed league is just goofy. Like,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
don't
the
see how the fun. How do you? I never understand it. Friends wanted me in their leagues, for obviously like football, everything like that. But it's like, oh, it's 8 people and it's the whole. It's mixed, 8 teams and no auction. It's a draft, and you only have like 14-man rosters. And I'm like this. To me, this isn't fun. The fact that you could find like guys that hit fifth in lineups that are on the like that are just available. Like, just
yeah,
it almost seems like it's not fun to me.
yeah. I like the so I think that I'm still playing the NFBC, and I think they've kind of found the sweet spot with 15-team mixed, where it's deep enough for the serious player, but not so crazy deep that you're drafting people you've never heard of. So that's kind of my cutoff is 15-team mixed. Um, but I don't play as many leagues as I used to, mostly because of how much time Fab takes. But yeah, I don't go thinner than 15 teams anymore.
But I mean, when's the last time you played in a deep league like what I'm describing?
The last time I played in like an NL or AL only, I think I stopped those about 5 years ago.
So is just that people don't play that anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I could. There's a couple that I know of. I don't have the time. Like that to me is not quite worth the time investment. Um, like to dig into Fab on a deep NL only league. I mean, you're spending all day, if not all week, trying to figure out who you're playing in your fifth outfield spot, and I don't have that time.
Yeah, but you have a
Which
reserve
is
squad. Like to me, those leagues you don't have to worry about Fab because there really isn't anyone worth bidding on anyway. Because they're on
that is
someone's where
true.
it's like a minor leaguer comes up and it's like, oh, he's gonna get a spot start. Like he's already on someone's. He's on someone's minor league roster. I mean, I was rostering like double A players, going
Yeah,
like
but
this
then
guy could be the closer.
I'm spending this season time still researching minor league players, and it's just like there's always I'm always spending time that I feel like, yeah, this is kind of fun, but it's crazy how why am I looking at the Double A roster for the Marlins on a Tuesday afternoon?
Well, I think it depends on your age. I think when I started playing rotisserie, I was like 12 years old, and like I had no life. I loved sports statistics. I couldn't play the sport in real life, so to me, it's like get home from school. You buy all the fantasy baseball magazines, right? You get at that point there wasn't even the internet. I mean, it was barely AOL. Get on my Commodore 64, and I remember putting together. I would get all the baseball magazines, like the season long ones, the thick ones, and then you had the Bill James one. Then you had the baseball almanac that was like thick, right? And then I would put in all the stat. I created a program in Basic to put in all the stats and aggregate all the like the projections together. Like this is like this in DFS. It's in 2021. Like the type of model that I made when I was 12 years old sounds like that's fucking stupid. Like that. There's obviously problems in what you're doing, but I was like, how scarce are the points in certain positions, right? Because
Yeah,
always that there was the strategies of like not rostering catchers. Not that you had if you want to go old school, the Alec Patton kind of like rostering all the $1 starting pitchers type of strategy. I
yeah.
mean, I read books that like from like the 80s on rotisserie baseball. Uh, but I mean, I found that fun. But now, now that I'm 42 years old, like I'm not going to spend 8 hours a day doing that. I'd rather spend 8 hours a day trying to determine if a guy's going to get a home run in a span of 3 or 4 at bats in
Yeah,
one
it is
fucking
just as
game.
silly when you say it that way, but yeah, I agree.
Right, but isn't that the biggest difference that you see? Like I've not been involved in the season long industry at all. I mean, like I played in the '90s, I played in the early 2000s, but I was never in. I mean, I didn't do content or anything. I was never involved in any high stakes stuff. Uh, do you think what is your sense on I when I started playing in 2015, I didn't start with baseball. I started with soccer, but I got into baseball in 2016. I got this sense in 2016 that a lot of hardcore season long fantasy baseball players viewed DFS as like, oh, it's luck box lottery type of like what you know. Yeah, you could predict that so and so is going to hit 38 home runs this year, 117 RBIs, but like viewing it from a game by game basis, they're like, oh, this takes no skill. But I always viewed it. I mean, I hope you agree that long term, from a slate to slate basis, yeah, there's a lot of luck involved in DFS. But I think over the course of a season, the good DFS players will be profitable more so than I think you get more lucky in season long due to like injuries or like great like lucky fab purchase that in DFS over 150 to 200 slates, like if you're if you could be profitable over 150 to 200 slates in DFS, I think that takes a lot more skill than winning a season long league.
So yeah, the way I see it is it got a bad rap for being called daily fantasy sports. It's not really a daily game. I mean, of course it is, but it's not. Like it's a long series of daily games. Like it's if all we if you like create a FanDuel account put in $10 and one lineup on one day, and you either win or you lose, and then you quit. Then it's a daily game and it's luck. But that's not what this game is. It's a long series of day after day after day. So, and you're right. Back around the time you started, it was pretty well hated on by season-long people, and I was one of the only people who played kind of seriously in both.
But why was it hate? Was it? I mean, it seemed like the people that hated it either didn't play or they played once and they're like, "Well, how could you possibly win at this game?"
You got it. Most of the people that I know that hated it, that came from season long, hated it, simply played a couple of times and didn't win and thought, well, this is luck because I know more baseball than these guys do. And it's true, they do know more baseball than these guys do. And they didn't want to put in the time to figure out how to do it. I think that's really where it came from. And I know several people like this. They played for maybe, a month and they lost and they were like, well, this is dumb because I know so much about baseball and I lost. This is just luck.
But it's funny to say, like, I'm the big proponent, obviously, of the game theory driven approach to playing DFS where you don't even need to know I mean, like, you don't even need to know the sport, but you still need to know the sport. Like, I think the stuff that you need when someone says they know baseball, like that, there's a much different approach to like what you focus on knowing baseball season long wise versus like in a 1 day sample. Like you have obviously for Roto Grinders premium members, Jesus Musings, right? Which I to me, you'd have to pay me $2,000 a day to write. I mean, like you're writing 14,000 words. I'm just like, and 14,000 words, and then at 7 o'clock, it's not worth anything anymore. Like I'd probably throw myself off a roof at that point. Like how do I write?
I do
that
occasionally.
Much? How do I write that much for it to be like no one's ever gonna like no one, I'm not going back 3 years ago to your column from May 21st to see like how many words have you written that are no longer going to be read ever again? Like some people could do it. I know that people are writers. I'm not much of a writer, so I don't like doing that. But the stuff that you talk about in your article is stuff that in season long doesn't have like the things that you look at for season long stat wise don't apply as much to daily and vice versa. Like other than like obviously, the good ballparks, like, oh, this guy's going to hit 81 games, in Coors Field, those types of things that everyone kind of knows. Or, well, this starting pitcher is going to pitch 32 times. But like the difference of like in season long, the umpires don't matter, right? I mean, like in daily, they do. The weather doesn't. You don't think in terms of like, well, it's going to be warmer there during the summer. Versus, like, it all evens out over the course of 162 games. But in daily, when people say they know baseball, is it just due to the fact that they know baseball from a perspective of a season-long sample size, but they're not accustomed to modeling, even if it's in their head, of what they know about baseball, to just a single day's games and what matters for the variance of one game versus the variance of 162.
Yeah, I think the problem runs in that. So the people who seriously play season long know the player pool, know every player individually inside and out. Like they can tell you, back to this guy in Little League, how good he was. Whereas a lot of DFS players don't know really anything about the fourth outfielder for most teams. Maybe they play him some days, but they couldn't tell you his name off the top of their head. So it's a difference of like the season long players, all the players and their kind of basic skill set. And I think you have almost all of the tools from playing season long that you need to move to DFS, but you have to add some things, forget some things. Like I still think pretty much any good season long player could figure out DFS if they wanted to, but you have to kind of be willing to scrap some things. And it took me a long time to be willing to fade the obvious chalk on a slate and not just lock button Nolan Arenado when he was in Colorado against a lefty. And Like you got to get some things out of your head that you're like, I know this guy is better than this guy, period. Any way you want to slice it. So I have to play him no matter what. In season long, that's true. Like you would never in a bazillion years for any reason draft, Donovan Solano ahead of Nolan Arenado, like for any reason ever. But in daily, there are times you would flip who you're playing, and you gotta be able to work around that in your head.
Well, don't you think this the season long type of player, like DFS is a salary cap based game, so you're not just selecting players. Like, yes, if Arenado and Solano were both $4,000, you're probably playing Arenado. But when Arenado's 5,500 and Solano's 4,000, well, that's a different story. Regardless of what's going on that specific day, uh, is it very similar to like? I mean, we see in like football with ADP or the auction price. Like you almost have to think in season for season long players that in daily, you're the auction is already being set for you. So you have to think in terms of just like in season long, it'd be like, would you pay more than $32 for this pitcher? And be like, no, that's what someone. Oh, whoever paid $32 for that pitcher, I don't know how they're gonna win because the wildly overpaid. Well, that's what you're doing in daily. You're looking at here are the prices that you have to pay. And do you believe that the player, obviously on a specific day, but even if you're not just going by the specific day, going, is this guy worth more than this other guy based on their price? Do you think, I mean, what are the types of things that you need to scrap, that you needed to scrap when moving from season long to daily? And how did you, and this is outside of the game theory stuff of
Yeah,
stacking and correlation and ownership leverage, because to me, those are the main things that are completely different from season long because you're the only one with that player in your league, right?
right,
There's no
right,
this if you have Nolan Arenado, you don't have to worry about someone else having Nolan Arenado that day. You're the only one that had. To me, that's the biggest difference.
right.
But like, what are those types of things that you had to unlearn in order to be successful at DFS, even though you were already successful at season long?
Yeah, I think the auction league strategy is a good analogy. Um, and that's harder than it seems like to get out of your head. So basically, you look at a DFS slate, and you can play whoever you want until certain point in your roster, like salary wise. Like you can click in the four most expensive players to start, and then you're kind of out of money. But to think of it in terms of how do I know if this guy? I know this guy's the best. How do I know if he's worth $5,100? And for a long time, I didn't know how to figure that out. Um, I would just sort of look at, okay, he's the best player. Can I afford him? Period. And that was like the whole decision process. Um, it took me years to try to figure out how do I know that $5,100 is worth spending on this guy versus not spending on this guy. And that's where all the other stuff comes in. Okay, does everyone else think he is? Does that matter to me? Um,
Well, a lot of times in DFS is that you don't do in season long is think you have to admit that a lot of what you do rostering hitters has almost more to do with the pitcher they're facing
right.
rather
Than
than the
who the hitter
hitters
is.
themselves. And in season long, you never think you're never doing a draft in the end of March or beginning of April, going like, is this guy gonna bat 8 times against the Orioles pitching staff? I mean, like you never think that way because you're playing. It's 162 games. Yeah, I guess there may be slight if the division has really bad pitching or something like that, but like to me, like I
Yeah.
look at I look at a slate and my first instinct is not like who are the best players hitter wise. It's who's the shittiest pitcher on the slate, and I want 5 guys from that team.
Yeah, but I think the biggest difference is embracing that the fact that you don't know what's going to happen in that one day, and getting out of your head that clearly the best player, even against clearly the worst pitcher, is not necessarily going to do anything that day. Whereas in season long, the best player, if he doesn't get hurt, is definitely going to do the things you think he's going to do, like with basically no question. In daily, he's probably not a lot of the time. Like, regardless of how perfect everything is, you can't have the same level of confidence in your this is the best player in daily versus this is the best player in season long, because it's one day and we see it all the time. So that's how.
But
And
how did the season long players? I mean, that's obvious. I mean, talking to DFS players, like that's like no brainer. I mean, like that's what we do. That's why it's not about one slate. That's why it's about a year. That's why you're playing turbo slates and I mean, you're trying to increase your sample size as much as possible to showcase and show the skill in your ROI. But I can understand completely season long players that come in and they do that. You go, how does Mike Trout not hit a home run here? And then he doesn't,
yeah,
and they throw their phone against the wall and they go, I don't know what donkeys win at this game. It must be all luck.
yeah. So what I think is
Here's the question:
mhm.
the first season that you played DFS, at what point did you have a sample size large enough where you saw that? Because you came from season long and you dealt with people that were like, DFS is for is a lottery. It's skill. I know baseball and I still lose. You can't. This is whatever. Like, at what point did you get to a sample size where you're like, oh, I get why this is. I get why this is skill over X amount of period of time.
I would say I really had about 3 years of consistent cash game numbers to tell me something. But as far as tournaments, like when I started playing, I played for many years without understanding really anything about how to play tournaments correctly. So the first few years I played DFS, I would say I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was still not embracing that variance enough.
Yeah, but you also have to admit that a lot of other people weren't playing well either.
Exactly. So that's the key part right there is me in 2012. If I showed up now in DFS, I would have no chance. Back then, I still did because we didn't have the tools. Like, there were a lot of just truly horrendous lineups out there to compete against. So you could get away with it a lot more of not knowing completely why you're playing this guy or not playing this guy, and just having plain old good lineups over the course of the season. But I would say it took me 5 years before I understood enough about tournaments to know that I actually was going to win long term and knew what I was doing. I really did play more or less incorrectly for a fairly long time.
Yeah, but for cash games, you probably didn't play incorrectly because, like, correlation and leverage are not like important concepts for if you have to just come in the top half of a contest. I mean,
Right.
like, you could it's it. I mean, you barely even need a model for that of just like, who's undervalued. How do I jam as many of those guys in my lineup? Who cares
In the
what teams
very
they're
early
on?
days of DFS, before there were any publicly available projections, um, to me, cash games were just wildly easy. I mean, I won most. You'll hear this from most pros. Like, you won a ridiculous percentage of cash games early on, and that's obviously backed way off now. But that's what kind of got me through playing for a few years of not actually really knowing what I was doing and not being particularly good, I would say.
But then you transitioned. I mean, we see you in contests now. I mean, obviously you play multiple sports. We see you in hockey and football, and you're playing 150 lineups. So it's not like you're not necessarily just playing single entry stuff. So like it's 2020, 2021. I go to results DB and it's like, oh, Cheese played 150 lineups, and you seem like the type of guy that is a cash game player, single entry type of player. Like, what you said, you played GPPs tournaments for a long time, like, incorrectly. Like, what got you to the point where it's like, no, I think I'm playing correctly now, and on top of that, I'm gonna max enter contests.
Yeah. So really, this was about, I don't know, just in the last couple of years that I've kind of hit this new point where I've figured out some things that it was always hard for me to switch knowing what my knowledge of baseball is to knowing what my lack of knowledge in other sports is, and sort of make my own peace with, like, I'm going to be that random guy who's never heard of this player and wins a tournament with him, and I'm fine with that. But really, it's because the tools have gotten so good, like the being able to use lineup HQ on roto grinders, with all the projections. Like, it's just simply easier to figure out how to do it now. Like, I can't build my own model for all these different sports, but I can use one that's good and available to me.
Okay, so on that note, here's a contentious argument. I think this is the primary difference between me and you. You write a column that's 10,000 words, right? 10,000 plus words. I read it because it's entertaining, right? And what else do I have to do? But to me, like, I'm using Derek Hardy's the bat. I'm very similar to you. I could build my own model, but it's never. It would take. Why not just use? I'll pay for it. I mean, like, it's just
Right.
efficiency wise. Like, it's good enough. I'm going to use primarily game theory anyway. So, like, I don't even need the most perfect model. I just need a reasonably accurate one, and then be able to gauge what the market's going to do and say they're overconfident here. I'm going to embrace variance there, and I just need to win one of these, once a year or something. 2 of these a year, and I'm wildly profitable in GPPs. But if the projections are good, like, I have the answer. Like you're like, I'm for. Yes, I was always into baseball, whatever. But now I'm at the point where it's like, what's the most efficient way for me to get from A to B? And I don't need to know why. Like, I could just look at the bat and go, oh, this is the best projected stack, and, like, I don't even. I played Akil Baddoo the other day in my Tiger stack. I literally never heard of him until he actually hit the home run. So, like, I didn't even know he was in 2 of my Tiger stacks, and he happened to fit. He projected or whatever, and he's what 0.0% owned. Like, you seem the type of person where like you need to know why. Like, you you write an article where I'm reading it going, I agree with everything that Cheese says. But, like, everything that she says is, like, in the numbers that I'm looking at the projections as it is. So, like, then what's the point of me reading Cheese if, like, yes, you're smart. You broke down exactly the reason why this guy is projected for 32 points at pitcher, but like what? Like, why do I need to read it? Is it weird for me to, because
No.
it sounds like I don't respect your work, but I do. It's just that from an efficiency perspective, it doesn't affect the decisions I make. Yet you say that, okay, now you use a projection. You're building 150 lineups with using projections, yet still are, like, digging into, like, strikeout rates and barrels and all the stuff that would go into the projections. So, like, what's the? I mean, I'm asking truthfully. Like, what's the time value?
What's the point of your
right?
life,
What's the
Dave?
point? Right? What's right? All right. That you get what I'm saying. It's like I agree with everything that you do. It's just that it's like, well, what's the point? Like, I already got the answer. Like, I'm using the calculator. You're doing it, like, by hand on an abacus, and I'm like, dude, I got the calculator. Like, let's say fucking go out for lunch or something. You don't need to spend 2 hours doing this.
Yeah. So the short answer is you're totally right in that. And I kind of tried to get into this, like, my first article this year where I said, it was 5 years ago I started writing like this, and it was necessary. Like, the projections weren't where they are now. The tools weren't where they are now. And I still think it's helpful to understand why the numbers are what they are. Nowadays, you can certainly get away without it. And I don't by any means think that everyone playing needs to read anything that I say, much less everything that I say. But for me, I'm still playing baseball for fun because I like it. Like every other sport, like if I play NBA one day, I don't care about it. I'm not going to watch a game. I don't enjoy it per se. I'm just saying I can make money on this long term with these numbers. Baseball, I still actually enjoy it, and I still make lineup by hand, because I think it's more fun.
You don't make 150 lineups by
No,
hand.
no, I don't make 150. I make my first 30 roughly by hand in my notebook. I still use the stupid notebook, and I love it. And that's why I still do it, honestly. Except the other place for me where baseball is just so different than anything else we're playing is the projection the error bar in the projections is so large that they essentially projections don't matter in baseball. Like in other sports, projections are everything. Like in NBA, you have nothing without projections. I still think baseball hitter projections are nonsensical goobity goop. Gobbledygook?
Well, I think it's primarily because like most projections we treat in our heads as normal distributions, and in most sports that they are. Like, I mean, yeah, you got that bell curve. So, like in NBA,
Right.
if the guy has a median projection of 38, it's like he'll score 38 and then 36, back and, like those outlier, like ones and 99s, like don't happen. Like if it's, but in baseball, like everyone's floor is 0 and everyone's ceiling is 32 for the most
Right.
part. And like you have guys that while we think of projections as a normal distribution. In baseball, it's every player's distribution. Like, I mean, our favorite guy that's no longer on the Rangers, Cardi's favorite guy, Rougned
Odor.
Odor.
Yeah.
Like these home run or bust guys that project for like, oh, they're 3,000. They project for 8 points. It's like they never fucking score 8 points. Like there's no way that this guy gets 2 singles or anything. It's like this guy's either striking out 5 times or hitting 2 home runs. So like from a median perspective, like I think you're absolutely like the median projection like really doesn't matter that much. It's more of a, and you covered this in your article. I think the more a worthwhile thing that you talk about is the range of outcomes, the variance of players. Like I always remember because I read your stuff when I started playing MLB, like because I needed like 2016. Like, okay, I'm a Roto Grinders premium member. Let's read this 15,000 word article. And I always remembered the Robbie Ray rule of,
Yeah.
Robbie Ray, you play when no one has him. And if he's chalk, you don't take him at all because he's either going to walk 5 guys and give up 9 runs or he's going to strike out 16 in 8 innings. But that highlights a DFS concept of
Right.
like the wider the range of outcomes, the more variance of a player, like you should exploit the confidence of the market when it's one way or the other. Because sometimes you see the opposite. Oh my God, that guy's too risky. I can't play him. And he's like 1% owned. It's like, fuck it, I'll take a shot. Right?
Yeah. So what you're saying now is exactly what I'm getting at as to this is why I still do it other than it being fun is that it is still useful to know which players are that much more boom or bust versus a little more projectable. But like when you look at no matter how good a projection model is, projecting 12 points for Joey Gallo is an irrelevant, dumb thing to do. Like, stop it. Like, there is no such thing. And like that makes him better than an 11.5 projected Reese Hoskins or whatever. Like, it's dumb.
But I mean, but truthfully, if the projection model is the most accurate over the course of like a million trials, like Gallo's going to score more points on average than Hoskins. But to realize that half a point difference, you're going to have to run God knows how many trials. That in the span of even 1,000 trials, the difference between those two players is, it's like you said, is stupid. It's like that half a point doesn't even matter.
Right. Um, and so, and then this plays into pretty much everything that you say all the time, which is how do you decide? Well,
Flip a coin.
if there's no difference between these two guys who are half a point apart in projections, then that's when it is very relevant what everyone else thinks of them.
Right, and that's play whoever you want. That's like I mean,
Yeah.
when the difference is so marginal, like it comes down to a time. It comes back down to time value of I see so many people that ask me like, especially in baseball, said this stack or that stack, and I'm like they're both about owned the same, they're both about projected the same, and it's like flip a coin. It's like, but Dave, you understand when it could frustrate people
Oh
where
yeah.
you say where the decision don't even spend your time because the decision is so marginal that like the 3 seconds you spent on deciding like is not going to show in your results. So like move on to something that's more relevant. Like to me in baseball, the most relevant, the biggest decisions that you're making is what do you do with the chalk pitcher and what do you do with the chalk team? Like what do you do
Yeah.
with the Dodgers and Coors? Are you going to play the stack and then get different elsewhere? Are you going to the chalk? We have a Pablo Lopez is 41% owned for whatever reason at SB2 on DraftKings, and it's like, do you play him? Do you stack against him? Like to me, those big leverage situations are the things that you should be spending the most amount of time on. What type of lineups can I build in either of those scenarios, and which direction should I go? Rather than deciding between, two 5% owned stacks or two 12% owned pitchers that project within a point of each other. And to most people, like they do you feel that most people that play DFS, especially baseball, because there's so many stats for baseball. And it's the national pastime. We're used to sabermetrics. We're used to all these stats. We have pitch effects. We have barrels and Statcast data. And do you think it's kind of hard when like where me? I think we could both agree with that. You could look at all the stuff you want, but in the span of one day, like almost nothing matter. Almost nothing matters. That maybe it's more beneficial for a lot of DFS players or average ones to pretty much simplify how they think about things rather than like I'm sure you must get questions about, well, how important is like expected ISO or like
Right.
all these or pitch effect or like this guy hits sliders well and it's like, well, pitch effects is a descriptive stat, so like you can't even like that isn't even predictive. So like how do you tell someone when baseball is so statistically driven to say uh uh, click on just click on some buttons and let's see what happens. I mean, like
Yeah.
sometimes that it's almost better to just simplify it down to what is everyone else going to do? Do something else, and then like that almost can't be like completely wrong.
Yeah. So, and I would tell you kind of what you're saying now is another reason why I do think why I like writing the article and why I think it's relevant. Knowing how a lot of people are playing, I do try to get you down to a simplified point where let's look at this slate and say, okay, let's not worry about him. Let's not worry about them. Here's this is the best play and this is the best team, but they're going to be this owned. And here's your option. I'm trying to sort of big picture it and help people get to that simplified point where we're not going to spend our day debating Tatis versus Seager. We're just going to say they're both great, and let's stop with that one. And we know that what's next. Um, I do try to, and that's just a thought process I enjoy is taking the big picture of the slate and kind of chopping it down bit by bit to get to where we don't have so many decisions to make. And they usually do come down to what you're saying. It's okay, there's four good pitchers, but this one is 50% owned and these three are 10% owned. And then there's two really obvious stacks that are going to take up all the ownership. How close to them are these next five stacks that I like? And I try to get it down to that. So that's your decision. And I think that's a little more digestible for people to sort of read a thought process behind that rather than just clicking numbers on it.
Right, you have to be comfortable. Like I get to the same point as you by going into lineup HQ, setting it for 300 lineups, setting up 5-man stacks and like as default and just go what show up in the first 300 lineups and I go, "Oh, okay, 68% of this guy." And then I look at your article, it's like, "Oh, you mentioned all the guys that somehow appear in a lot of the most of the top 300 lineups." But like the mental process of like we're not doing anything different. I mean, like
Yeah.
we're not doing anything different. It just I feel I'm never saying that what you're doing is wrong. All I'm saying is what I'm doing is more time
Oh yeah.
efficient of just like I could show up a half an hour before a slate, not knowing anything about nothing, who's pitching, what's going on, and just go, let me go to a projection source that I trust, Do I trust the model? Yes. Okay. Run the top. I could export it and run 1,000 if I want, and go. Okay, here, and you could run a simulation. We have Slate IQ at Roto Grinders. It's very similar, and then just run simulations and go. Well, this guy's going to be overowned, and that guy's going to be overowned. This stack's going to be a little too owned, and like I could figure that out in 5 minutes. It until you get you. I mean, you've been playing DFS for baseball for like 9 years now. Like like it's something that you couldn't do in 2012. Like what I
Right.
do, like maybe you had guys like Kandia and Sahil, like guys that like were had the tools before everyone else had the tools, type of
Right.
thing. But now that we're in 2021, uh, why why do you think that this is a weird question to ask? Why do you think that your methodology, while both of our methodologies are identical. I mean, are
Right.
pretty much identical. You use projections making 150 lineups, right?
Right.
How come do you believe outside of the knowing the sport aspect of
Mhm.
why do you feel that you get much less pushback on on your methodology, yet my methodology just seems like oh you bang against your keyboard. You're just gonna look. I'm just gonna look at a series of numbers and just put together lineups. And I have guys in my lineups I've never heard of, and it's like, well, how could that be profitable? And it's like, dude, me and Cheese are doing the same fucking thing.
I think we're still kind of nowhere near the point where people are willing to admit that they don't know everything. And like, I just think most people really want to, not even want to, need to feel like they understand why they're playing who they're playing. And if they don't, and then there's also a lot of people, certainly this was me when I started, that if you're not playing completely for a living, if you're playing for fun, it might not be any fun if you're not doing it that way. There still are a lot of people out there like that. Like,
Right,
you know,
I get that a
enjoy the
lot.
game.
I get that when in NBA when I'm just pressing, like give me the optimal lineup and I'm playing it in all my double ups, and people are like, "Well, that doesn't sound fun." I go, "You know what's fun? Winning money. That's
Right.
to me. I wouldn't be watching NBA but at least I understand. Like, if you're playing for fun, feel free to pick players for whatever. They're wearing your favorite. It's Wednesdays, and you always pick guys with a T in their last name. Fine, I can't argue with you. If your goal is fun, and this is like I want to waste $3 on, I want to play a lineup with everyone's name being Tyler. Like, fucking do it. I'm for that. I'm for all those fucking fucked up things to do, or the revenge narrative lineups, or that all the lineups that have a guy with a junior in the name, like if you're throwing in $3 to have fun and that's your entertainment, like then I'm not talking to you. Like then
Right.
you do. I have nothing against, and you don't have to play well. I don't give a shit. The reason you having fun is the reason I'm able to make a living. Like so,
Right.
like I want you to feel free to put in as
Have
many
a blast.
right, have a blast. Put it in as many dead lineups as you want. Play substitutes, pay pinch hitters. I don't give a fuck. Play relief pitchers. People play pitchers against their stacks. Go ahead. Have all the fun you want. But like if you're asking me a question on how to be profitable long term on this, like they're like, do you want to be able to do your profitable process in 4 hours or in 4 minutes? So
Right.
like to me, like if I could do the same thing in 4 minutes, why wouldn't I?
And so it's potentially a dumb answer, but I prefer to do it in 4 hours. Like I just actually do. Like I truly still like it, which is bizarre, but I do. And I still do think there's baseball is still enough different than the other sports that you're still going to get. I'm still going to get some stuff that the projections aren't going to get because of how dumb projections are, even when they're correct. That I know in other sports, which may be why I don't like NBA. I know there's nothing I can find, or I don't know how to find anything that's better than project. There's nothing I could do if I had 4 hours, and I do. I have 4 hours, but I don't. I would do nothing useful with it, and I would do nothing enjoyable with it.
But you
In
see people in
baseball,
NBA do. But to me, in dealing, I mean, I've been in Roto Grinders for 2 years. I'm always in the Discord. I'm always in a bad mood. because people are
That is
asking
true.
me stupid questions. I try to help. You see, I spend tons of time
You're a
trying.
very nice person
Yeah,
in
I'm
your
much
own
more nicer
special
than
way. Yeah.
people think that I am. Uh, and I truly enjoy talking strategy, like outside of the sport. Like to me, the conversations of like you said, like who's the best shortstop in baseball to tease for is like if it has nothing to do with the game of DFS, like I don't care who wins the World Series. I don't care about any of that stuff. But when it comes to DFS strategy, like I'll debate shit, I'll simulate shit, we'll get our Excel spreadsheets out, we'll do whatever, talk about that type of stuff. But it's so hard, like when people are like, because what I get emailed like, how much time do you spend like, or I have a 9 to 5 job, right? You get this. I want to play DFS more seriously, but I don't have the time that you do. You spend all day researching this stuff and whatever, and I have to just break the notion of like dude, like especially in NBA this season or whatever, like it's like dude, I don't even think about NBA until like an hour before lock because fuck knows what's the hell's gonna happen when the injury report doesn't matter anymore. And in baseball, it's kind of like there's no decisions I can make until I see the batting orders, and I can make 150 lineups in 20 minutes. I mean, like I just have to have like gauge the ownership and get. I mean, like how much time is there? But it's made out. It seems like the notion that you need all this time to do, like you said, you're not going to spend those 4 hours in NBA. Like you're going to spend those 4 hours in baseball because you actually enjoy
Right.
doing that, but you wouldn't enjoy doing it in NBA. Like that comes back to the simplified thing of I think that do you okay, here's a question. This is another contentious type of question. Do you
Excellent.
believe that content sites such as Rotogrinders, we have Awesomeo, we have there's others
Right.
that I always say that 95% of the audience wants something that they don't need. Like, for instance, like your article, like all the stuff that Rotogrinders we produce the grind down that there's all multiple sports, all this type of stuff. Yet what we're both saying is that the tools have gotten so good and the models have gotten so good that like the most efficient way to play profitably is to you could play in 10 minutes type of thing as long as you have these tools. To me, I'd pay for Rotogrinders just for the projections, and you could no one there could be no expert survey, none of that. But how do you reconcile the fact that 95% of the audience thinks you need that? And then isn't that a conflict of interest of like I'm trying to teach how I'm profitable, and it's kind of hard for me to say. It's weird for me to be in the Rotogrinders Discord and for me to try to honestly teach someone how to be I mean, I'm 100% saying here's how you read the projections. Here's how you think about game theory. Here's leverage, here's whatever, and here are some decisions that don't fucking matter. Like, dude, pick names out of a hat at this point. Like, put those 8 guys' names in a hat and pick it out. And then they'll go, like, well, if I'm going to do it this way, then, like, what the fuck's the point of me reading, like, Cheese's article? What's the fuck? And, like, I put in a hard place of, I mean, you can, but I mean, is it the most efficient? I mean, is your decision going to change based on something that Cheese writes or Andy writes? It's like, it's possibly not. So do you think that there's the reason why people don't simplify to the decisions that matter come down to like the business model of content sites? Like you promote the fact that look how much stuff we got when like a lot of it is redundant and not necessarily necessary for your profitability.
So I still think most people just want something because they want it. And you're right. There's a lot of stuff you can totally do without.
Doesn't mean it's
And
not valuable. I just want to say
right.
it's not necessary.
Yeah. So 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I would have been offended and probably argued with you. But I feel like the tools, like you say, the tools have gotten so good. Um, you can absolutely play without ever reading anything I say. I'm totally on board with that. Like not everybody needs.
We should have done this. We should have done this 4 years ago. I think it would have been more entertaining if we argued.
Yeah. Oh, I would fight you if you were here still for the people. Um, but speaking more, there's different kinds of content. There are definitely articles written or content written that is pointless and just for entertainment. But as far as like what I'm trying to do, I still just think there's too many people that need to have an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing, and they're never going to stop needing that, and that's what I can do. I think that's still relevant. Like you still have decisions to make when you're playing. Again, this is baseball specific. The projections, pitcher projections, if you just assume that they're correct, you're missing a huge point of where's the inefficiency in that, where's the ceiling and the floor, and who's actually likely to hit near that median, who might hit 50 versus 10. And I think a lot of people, if you don't know that and you just play by the projections, you can still win playing correctly over the long term, doing what you're doing. But in any day, you're going to miss like a lot of projections are flat out wrong on pitchers because pitchers change their pitch mix and their velocity. Like that kind of stuff is relevant, and it's not in any model, and the models do it incorrectly. And sometimes the numbers are just like they're just flat out so wrong
Well,
that if you
but
don't know
that
it,
comes back to the point. Like that to me, I'm not arguing that fact. Like I start with the beginning point of the first question you ask is, do you trust the model? The answer is yes. Then you have the numbers. Like if you're saying I trust the model for this, but not for that, and that's a different. Then sure, absolutely, I could see in the projections the ranges of outcomes of different pitchers because their standard deviation is going to be higher. So I know that they're a higher variance pitcher. But I mean, this it doesn't mean that you go in with absolutely no like baseball knowledge whatsoever. But do you believe like I said this to someone else like last week that was just getting into have not watched baseball, could basically name like Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, like maybe a couple of guys that they've heard of, but they were playing NBA, they were playing NFL, they're just getting into MLB DFS, and they're like, what? They're trying to treat the projections the same way they do in NBA, and I told them that you don't do it. They're like, how many points off the optimal do I play? I'm like, you really baseball is so high variance that like dude, you could play a lineup that's 50 fucking points off the optimal, and that could be the nuts. I mean, like you're playing teams and all that type of stuff. But I told him, I said, if you want to play large field GPPs, said, and you're on DraftKings, just just play 5-man stacks. Play if you just did this by default, play 5-3 with two pitchers, obviously. On FanDuel, if you played 4-4, just take two teams. Don't even look at if you don't even want to look at the lines or anything. Just say, I'm going to just randomly pick two teams. Try to play the guys at the top of the orders because they're going to probably get an extra at bat. Try to weave two 4-4s together with a pitcher or a 5-3. Like, to me, like, if you just did that with no baseball knowledge, you may be ahead of half the field just by without knowing anything about baseball, just because like from a GPP perspective, like correlation increases the variance of your lineup so greatly in MLB that if that stacking is going to be king. Same thing for NHL, right? Just take line power play one from this team and the second line from that team. Like, don't you think that that's almost more valuable than like trying to figure out like, well, which one of these four, like you could take a look at your article and then, oh, I'm gonna play the DraftKings GPP. I'm gonna play the two pitchers that Cheese said to play. I'm gonna play the two guys from this team, and then one guy from the. Oh, I'm gonna play Seager over Tatis with no other Dodgers, and it's like you look at that lineup and you go, you made some really good player selections, and you have like almost no chance to. You're just throwing your money away. And the guy that I told to just randomly pick two teams and stack them, like that's the guy that's could win. Does that come back to the season long players looking at this going like, how do you call this a skill game? Like, but what I'm saying, like the construction wise, like if they didn't understand that that's the skill part of it, like
right?
that's why they're losing all the time.
So if you were only allowed to do one thing, and like your choice was either I'm going to dig into all the players and read the article and build my lineup, or I'm going to hit the stack button and hit optimize. I definitely would say hit the stack button, optimize, and be done. Like if that's it, you only have time to do one thing or interested in doing one thing. I think you should just go and optimize and stack and be done with it. Definitely. But personally, I have time and interest in doing more than the one thing, and the next step make the one thing way better. Because the projections are nonsense. So if I had to choose one,
I'd choose. Projections are just nonsense.
They are. It's dumb. It's dumb if we're honest. But again, yeah, what you're saying, if someone's new to baseball and they just want to play and have a chance to win, I think they should do what you're saying. Absolutely. Like, just click the button. If you're playing FanDuel, click 4 stacks, pick a few teams with high totals, take the top 5 projected pitchers and give them a percentage and run it. That's what I would do. Absolutely. But I will definitely for sure beat that guy in the long run. Like,
yeah, because you're doing ball, but there's a difference between doing that and then also doing that like in some type of strategic manner. Like in your articles, you do have strategy stuff in your articles of like how to stack this team versus that pitcher. Like you still talk about like, yes, there are slates. I have to admit that I look and I go, I could stack 8 teams, and I'm just like, oh, fuck it. I'm just going to stack all of them. Just like, I'm not even going to, just give me all of them combined. And then obviously, then what ends up happening if you're using an optimizer, you get to this with the 150 lineups, is that because the projections are nonsense, what we mean by nonsense is that the difference between the projections are so marginal that like half the player pool should be projected about the same median anyway. So like, it's not that the projections are nonsense. It's just like, dude,
right. A guy that scores 13 is not projected for 13. He's not going to score 13 points. Period. Right.
But the point is that if you just press the optimize button, you're going to get 71% of Cedric Mullins in your. I mean, like you can get the $2,200 leadoff hitter for the Orioles is going to be in like 71% of your lineups as a one-off if you're playing like a 4-3-1 or something like that. Like knowing that because projections are nonsense and Cedric Mullins is not going to score 8.34 points, that maybe you don't want him in 71% of your lineup. Maybe that's when you're like, do I want to just have him in just Orioles stacks? Or do I mind him in a one-off in these types of lineups? And then you see that, oh, you're playing on DK and you have 60% of one pitcher, you have 40% of another pitcher, and they're all happen to be in the same lineups. Like you're like the guys that you have 20% and 10% right. are all clumped together. Like you get clumping type of things where you're not really getting the diversification that it looks like from your exposures, or you're relying on Jay Bruce is underpriced, and he's a boomer bust type of guy, and he's going to be 37% owned at 2,700. And if I just went by the projections and hit the optimize button, I'd get 87% of them. And it's like, maybe you put 10% max there, or you select we now have the only in stacks, and you go Jay Bruce only in stacks, so he's not a one-off. Like, to me, those are the strategic things that are the difference between just, like you said, pressing 4-4, pressing 5-3, hit the optimal button, 20 lineups and enter them. Like, it's better than not having any type of construction dynamics. But really the type of stuff that you go on from there is exactly what I described.
Yeah. So I don't think most people can do what you're saying to do without somebody telling them about it. Like, I don't think most people can look at Lineup HQ and realize whether or not they should have 70% Cedric Mullins. That's where I think it is useful to have an article or some ranking or something saying, yes, here's the reason why Cedric Mullins pops in projections. Here's the reason why you don't actually want to play him as a one-off in a Padres stack. Like, people are not going to get that without somebody telling them.
Yeah, but that's a
I don't
game.
think.
But to me, it's a game. It's you're playing a high. I mean, it's the concept of you're playing a high owned guy that has a low. Like when we're talking about Cedric Mullins, we're talking about someone that I know he put up a ton of. He went 5 for 5 the other day, but typically someone that's not like a guy that's going to hit 2 home runs in a game. So he's going to be a narrow range of outcomes player. Jay Bruce is going to be a wide range of outcomes player. He's going to hit 2 home runs or strike out 4 times. If that guy's 30-40% owned on a 9-game slate, like, do you want to play that guy as a one-off? Because it's like everyone's playing to me, you get leverage by not playing him as a one-off. But if you want to play him in a stack, at least the other Yankees in the lineup decrease the total ownership. And it's like, if Jay Bruce does well, Gleyber Torres or Gio Urshela is, 3% owned. It's like, well, you get that benefit now and you beat all these lineups that have a chalk random Jay Bruce one-off. But to me, it has nothing to do with Jay Bruce. It has to do with, you're more like you would have to agree that playing chalk hitter one-offs is usually a negative EV strategy in GPPs.
Yeah, so I think we're saying the exact same thing. And what I'm saying on it is I don't think almost anyone knows how to figure that out from looking at lineup HQ and clicking buttons. So that's where the value of other content is.
But how wouldn't you know clicking buttons? You would see Jay Bruce projected ownership be like 36%. And then you'd see, and you'd run 150 lineups and see that he's in 86% of the lineups. Like, do I want to play the highest owned guy in 86%? Like, to me, like, you would learn that by just like the concept of, let me go through where's Jay Bruce, and it's like, oh, I have all these Jay Bruce one-offs, and should you be playing chalk one-offs in large field GPPs? Like, you can, but traditionally, like, that's something you should avoid more. I mean, you would agree you would avoid more.
It's not a either or situation like, okay, I either play Jay Bruce chalk or I don't. Mm-hmm. So then you knock him down and say, I don't want more than 20% Jay Bruce. The next goofy guy jumps up to 60%. And then you got to know what to do with him. Like, I really don't think
you have to cap the goofy guys. What's so hard? Dave, what's so hard about just saying, I'm going to cap the goofy? If you see goofy guys.
Well, who's goofy? Like, how do you decide who's goofy? Is every high-owned player goofy and every low-owned player not goofy? Like, you still, at some point, you got to play somebody there. And you're saying, like, who not to play. To a point, eventually you got to play somebody, and he might be goofy.
Well, you create more balanced builds. Then you adjust your pitcher. You play more of the cheap pitcher, so you're playing more expensive shortstops or something. I mean, like it's
yeah. And again, I agree. Like, I think you're right. I think we get, like you've said before, like I think we get to the exact same point. I don't think most people know how to get there without somebody telling them. And I know you're trying to teach them. I don't think most people can get there with button clicking.
Well, I'm trying to teach them how to get there with button. I'm just, you take a look. You take a look at the range of outcomes on the guy, and you go, well, do you want to play a high variance player at that's going to be in a third of lineups as a one-off? And it's like, I mean, yes, you could find some if you're playing really off the board stacks and stuff and off the board pitchers, sure, but in the long run, you're more likely to not. So all I need to know is what they're owned and what their range of outcomes are. Because, I mean, even in baseball, if you told me that Mike Trout was going to be 3K on DraftKings and he's going to be 80% owned, like, you easily make the case that you X him out. And people would look at you like you're crazy. Like, how do you, Mookie Betts, normally 6,000. If I told you his minimum price on DraftKings at 2,000, like, and he was going to be, in a large field GPP, going to be 92% owned. Like, I can't see how that's profitable to even play him in any lineup. Right? But yeah. I mean, but that's the concept. But isn't that the concept? Don't I not have to mention who the players are? Just like it's baseball. They're going to get 5 at bats, and who knows? No one should be 92% owned.
Yes. So again, I agree. But at some point you got to play somebody, and at some point you got to stop saying I'm not going to play him because of how owned he is. And then so you get to a point, okay, once everyone in my lineup's at 20% owned, I'll play them. It doesn't matter who they are. That's fine.
Like, do that. There you go.
I don't think most people can do that. Like,
What's
Like
so hard? You put it in
that's what you're
you put it
saying.
in the setting. I could go right now, Dave. I'm going right now. I'm going to the global hitter exposure 20%, no more max, and then there you go. Now I don't have to worry about that anymore.
And I think that's fine. Like I'm saying, for someone that doesn't know what they're doing, they will win more doing exactly what you just said than anything else.
Right, but they still may not know what they're doing.
But I will beat them easily
Right.
because and so I would rather just do that. Um, yeah,
Yeah, but you play 150 lineups, so you get what I mean. You're doing what I'm doing. Like it's
absolutely.
the same. I mean, you get what I'm saying by you lose it. You use the optimizer is only as good as the user that's using the Like the optimizer is not going
Yes.
to tell you. It's just solving a math problem, and it's going to keep on going to try to put in all these median F points into your lineup until you tell it otherwise. And if you don't want if you don't want Jose Altuve at second base in 80% of your lineups, like, well, that's what the math tells it to do based on that median number. But if you don't want that, you have to override that. And what are you gonna override versus not override? Like in basketball, we don't have as much of this problem because, like you said, the projections aren't nonsense in basketball. So like when we have a guy that's like 4,000 that should be like 7,500, like if you have that guy in like 98% of your lineups, like we're not batting an eye in NBA. We're just like no, he's kind of lock him in. Like he's gonna get there like almost all the time. In baseball, like that doesn't happen. So, but isn't that the concept? Like I still don't get back to the fact of like, do you think that most people have a problem not with the concept of just how to portray that concept into using lineup page? Like it's a software user software issue and not like people don't get the concept that you probably shouldn't play like hitters are highly variant and there's no such thing as like a lock button hitter in MLB DFS.
I think almost everyone understands the concept, but that's harder than actually doing it when you put the money in and enter the lineup. Like it's really easy to say you should not play $3,000 Mookie Betts at 95% ownership, but it's really hard to actually put your money into a lineup that doesn't have a $3,000 Mookie Betts, regardless of what you know the concept is.
Oh, so
And I
so you
think,
think do you think it's a fear thing?
yeah, exactly. I think it's a fear of missing out and a fear of being wrong. And like,
Because you look stupid if Mookie Betts for 3,000 goes out and puts up 28 fantasy points on DraftKings, and you're like, well, I played 150 lineups and I have zero of them. Like you look like an idiot.
yeah, I think that's the bigger factor than anything. Like, it's totally easy to say that in concept. Like, this is correct. Never play any 90% on batter for any reason, anywhere. But to actually do it is way harder, and I still don't think a lot of people are going to be able to do it.
But you do it,
I do,
right? Okay.
but I'll give you another example. Like, this is why I still play cash games in baseball. Not so much because the ROI is high anymore. I know I am unwilling to go into a slate and not play any $3,000 Mookie Betts. We say this like it's a thing. If there were that, I would still have. I could at least say, here's my Mookie Betts lineup. I feel better about myself. I have to mark him as a core play because he's the best play, and I have to play him in my lineup. So here he is. It makes me feel better about having these goofy tournament lineups without the obvious best play.
Yeah, but
I
that's optimal. But
personally,
that's optimal for those games. Like if you're playing,
yeah,
obviously, if you're playing double ups, you play. You don't need to win a double up. So like,
right.
that's the concept. Yeah, sure, jam in.
And I just personally, I need to do it to get out of my own head. Like, I'm gonna have to have a Mookie Betts lineup that day, so I do. And but if you didn't play cash games at all and you were only playing one big tournament and you were fading them, I just don't think most people could do it, even if they know it's the right play. I think you should, but I don't think other than you, I don't think anyone actually would do it.
No, the sharp players would.
I mean, sure, a few people would.
Right. Well, that's what isn't that the reason why I look at results DB every day and go on the pregame show and show it's like it I'm not showing the winning lineups of the contest. I'm showing the sharp players and the choices that they made. And that's another thing of like those fear based things of uh like imagine uh like it's easy to play the chalk, and if it doesn't get there, you're unlucky, right?
Mhm.
Like it's easy to say, like if whoever's chalk today or whoever in baseball, the chalk pitcher, Jacob DeGrom or whatever, and you go, he's the only stud pitcher on the slate. The hitting pricing is soft enough on both sites. How do you not just plug in Jake DeGrom? I mean, like he's 11,000, yes. How do you not like if he gets hit up a little? I mean, he's probably not going to get blown up, but if he only puts up 16 fantasy points, you at least could say to yourself, what the fuck am I going to do? Not play Jake? I mean, like if he has a bad game relatively for fantasy, you don't blame like your decision. You're just
Right.
what am I supposed to do? Not play him? I mean, like, and if he does well, you're like, oh, it's obvious whoever didn't play him is an idiot. But then if you go to sharp players lineups and you see on the days like if Jacob DeGrom didn't do well, and you see a couple of sharp players that were way under on him, like most people can't equate the result to the process of, oh, these guys were building lineups because they believed that Jacob DeGrom at 72% ownership. They still played some of them because he's still the best raw points pitcher, but there were plenty of lineups that had high win equity that maybe 11K pitcher doesn't get there. Maybe he only puts up 16 points. He's not necessary anymore. So they look at something like results DB and go, well, why did these guys not play? Like, I thought he was obvious. And then, like, if Jacob DeGrom puts up 40 points, they look at those players and go, well, they were idiots for only playing 10%
Right.
of them. Like, but the result doesn't matter of it. It's like, take a look at their lineup construction and see what was the reason for it, not what was the result. They were able to build plenty of lineups that if Jacob DeGrom did not pitch well, they would have won first place. And they identified that. While you may have played lineups that the only way for you to win first place is if, like, the whole fucking chalk, like, you have to have the chalkiest lineup and you're going to score 300 points in MLB. And to me, that a lot of times that's the harder point to convey, that you're going to win the most money on the lowest scoring slates. And even if you're right on the high scoring slates, you have to be pretty much like you have to be
Mhm.
perfect to win a large field GPP with all chalk and like one slight differentiation because everyone's sharing the same points. But when you try to play the other way of I'm going to fade all the chalk and play for the low scoring slate, you're just going to look like an idiot like 90% of the time.
Yeah. And so that whole mental aspect, I think most players, I keep saying this, are not anywhere near being able to actually play that way, even though they get it. Like if you have a conversation when you're not building a lineup about the concept, almost everyone is on board. Like, yes, that sounds correct. I get it. It makes sense. When you actually click the button, putting your own money into it, I don't find that most people are willing to actually play worse plays.
But do you think this comes to the concept to the notion that there's such a thing as good chalk and bad chalk? Like
Yes.
like most people, like they'll ask in basketball or baseball or whatever DFS. It's like I get it that they get the concept of like, okay, I know I can't just play all the chalk because I can't win a GPP that way. I need to find leverage somewhere. But like they have multiple choices. We have, do you play the chalk stack? Do you play the chalk pitcher? Do you play this in NBA? Do you play the team with the highest total? Do you like so they know that most likely one of these pieces of chalk is going to fail. But which one's the good one? Which was the bad one? And like the reaction that I typically give is you're describing something that happened after. Like those terms are, you could describe what's good and bad, but all these things have certain probabilities. And if you're telling
Right.
me that here's the 6 chalk things and which one is the good and which one is the bad, but they all have the same probability, like that's like me telling like which is the good side of the coin and which is the bad side of the coin. Like it's a coin. It's heads or I don't all I know is that half the time it's going to be bad chalk. Half the time it's going to be good chalk, but all four of them, or all six of them are the same. So does that come into like people can't wrap their heads around like there's no such like choose one if they're all equal, roll a fucking die, fucking roll 1 to 6 and put them in order and you have to fade one of them and whichever one like but game theory wise that would be optimal. That's game theory optimal. Yet telling people that it almost feels like I'm the idiot for saying like it sounds
Right.
ludicrous, but we both know that if all things being equal, like that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be thinking of who's good chalk, who's bad chalk. You could think of who's underowned and who's overowned, and maybe that makes it a little bit easier to go like, well, Mookie Betts at 3,000 shouldn't be 92% owned. Like maybe he should be 60% owned. And maybe this guy is overowned, but not as overowned. So you could think in those terms, but it still comes
I'm
down.
willing to use the term bad chalk on occasions more than I'm willing to use the term good chalk.
Well, doesn't bad chalk really mean that they're overowned for their expectations?
Overowned is probably a better term for it, for
right.
sure. Yeah.
So someone is owned, 60. I'm just using terms. 60% owned, but they only have a 20% chance of being quote successful or making value. It's like they're 3 times more owned than they should be. They're still of good value, but they're just still like way overowned. And good chalk would be like we see. Look in NBA, we see good chalk. I mean, when some guy's out and the guy's 4,000 underpriced, and he's gonna be 64% owned, but truthfully he should be 94%. I mean, like he's the highest owned player on the slate, yet he's still underowned. But people view that as good chalk. But to me, actually, he's not. He's the highest owned player, yet I still wouldn't consider him chalk. Because there's going to be 40% of people in this contest that decided for some fucking reason to play a guy that's like twice as he's an $8,000 player at min price in basketball, projected for like 12x median. Like you're just throwing money away at that point by not playing him in every lineup. But people think of that as, oh, he's the highest owned player, he's chalk. It's like, no, truthfully, he's not.
We almost should have said this right at the top. Like, one of the big things about baseball and what you're talking about now is that it comes right after NBA season. And you get a lot of new players who they learned how to play with NBA, and then they come to baseball and they do it the same way with these percentages, with ownership. And they assume 65% can be good chalk where it can't. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things to get out of your head immediately is it's not the same game.
Even pitchers can't be that good.
Yeah, pitchers are more projectable and a smaller range than hitters, but it's still nowhere near NBA.
Right, but still, like you could, if Jacob deGrom was 5K, like you could still make a case for fading him in lineups.
Yes, but not to the same extent of the Mookie Betts thing.
Right, of course.
Yes, but
that's more similar to that.
Yeah,
but don't you think that these concepts that we're talking about are more that to get to bookend to the coming from season long, that all the concepts that we've just been talking about for the past 10-15 minutes, like season long players, like this is not even, would it even be in their brains at all?
There's no need to think about it because you're the only person who like you said, you're the only guy who has this guy.
Right. But don't you think that that's the biggest step over of being able to think in terms of like on one day I'm trying to beat 70,000 people in this contest rather than I'm trying to figure out who's going to do best today in baseball?
Yeah, so and I know you've said basically this before, like you've got to forget you're not trying to score a certain amount of points. You're actually playing a game against other people. Like it's not, I just need to find a way to get 300 points today. points in baseball, like I've said enough, that's these projections are nonsense. There's no such thing as projecting 300-point lineup. It doesn't stop it. But you're playing other people, so having if every single person playing plays the same lineup and the projections were right on that day, you just all score 300 points and you tie. So it's kind of even that's irrelevant to have the best lineup. So you're still playing against other people, and you're not playing against some. Even if we knew what the optimal lineup was, which we don't, you're not playing for that.
I mean, if we knew what the optimal lineup was, if we
Right.
knew the optimal, that would be an interesting. If we knew the optimal score, that would actually be. I would be able. That would be useful.
Yeah.
Not with the players, just the score. Like if you told me, like on a baseball slate, that the optimal lineup was like 168, I'd be like, this is going to be a very low scoring slate. If you
Yeah.
tell me it's 270, whatever, it's like, oh, this is going to be a high scoring slate. And actually, you could construct lineups differently depending on it.
Yeah. So, like, but what you were saying before, when you build a bunch of lineups and you look at them, and someone will ask you, how many points away from the optimal can I get? You say you can go 100 points away from the optimal. That's correct, because you're not playing against some number. Like, you're playing against other people who are building lineups that are not going to be optimal.
Right. And also, any type of optimal median lineup is not. It doesn't have enough variance for a GPP to begin with. I mean, like obviously, if you home run hunt and score perfect, sure. Good luck trying to do that as a repeatable process. Like these one offs, and like whatever your cash lineup is. Like to me, like you never play your cash lineup in a large field GPP. I wouldn't even play the cash. I don't even play my cash lineup in small field GP. I mean, like small field GPPs. I'm still stacking. I could be a little bit more chalky. Yeah, maybe I play the chalk pitcher combination. Maybe maybe I don't mind the ownership so much, but but you see, if you download the CSVs, even the large field GPPs, uh, I see people that have went to a projection model, clicked the optimize button without stacking, and played. And I've seen multiple. I mean, like this is why I love the large field GPPs, even though I hate them. Because
Right.
it's first you have to. I mean, it's just stupid. It's like you come in third place. It's like, oh, there goes my year. I didn't come in second or first, right? The drop, like that type of shit. But it's hard. It's hard for me to download the CSV to look. And I check every once in a while because I don't have to do it much anymore. And I take a look at some of the lineups that are like by the cash line, and I'm like, dude, like the rake is paid for. Like these lineups have no chance of winning. It's like, and of course, as I'm a subscriber elsewhere, so I need to see what my competition's doing. I could just go to other side. I could press the optimal button and go. I'm gonna find that lineup 80 times in this contest, and
Yeah.
go, what are people? That's why I said that. That is my methodology more of a user software issue than a conceptual issue. People going to lineup HQ going like let's say someone without using stacks or anything like that just went give me 50 lineups, like just optimal, like you're getting 50 cash lineups, and then they're throwing it into GPPs, and they go, oh, why, and to me it's almost insidious. It's an insidious mistake because more likely than not those lineups are going to have good min cash equity because they're low
Yeah.
variance lineups, right? So you're gonna put in 100 lineups for $4 a 20 lineups for $4 a piece in the 20 max, and you just built 20 cash lineups, and you're gonna put in $80, and maybe you'll get back 67. Maybe some days you'll get 92. I mean, like it'll be so much lower variance that you spend the entire. Oh, I was close. That you come in with one of these types of lineups, you come in like 48th. You're like, oh, I'm getting close, and it's like, dude, you need like a perfect blue moon storm for one of these lineups to win first place in this contest. Yet they're getting back enough money, or they're seeing like they're bleeding money away. They don't realize it because they're not using like a roto tracker or anything, but I won $20 here, I lost $20 there. That they don't realize that, like, dude, you're not going to win. Like they think they're using the optimizer. They're going, I'm just
Right.
going there and the projections and the optimizer, and then they go, I haven't had good luck with this optimizer. I'm going to go sign up for this side and use their optimizer because they have different projections. They don't realize the difference between the two. So to me, a lot of the mistakes that I see from looking at the CSVs themselves are just people that like are not using the software well. Like
Yeah.
it just seems like what like or they're forcing in stat. They're like, you know, I see lineups, someone's exposure, and I'm not talking about sharp players. I'm talking about just some random dude that put in 40 lineups in, and it's like it's 45-man Dodger stacks of the exact same. It's like I could tell that they locked in 5 players from the Dodgers and then just pressed give me 40 lineups, and they only had unique players on one. So it's like the same lineup 40 times with just like one player different as a one-off. And it's like, well, I mean, if you could come in first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I mean, yeah, you're either taking down all of the money in this GPP tonight, or you're not getting anywhere. But I see that so often that it's hard for me to say that they're not getting the concept right. Like they understand it enough, but just like they just don't understand what like projections and an optimizer does.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Most people, I keep saying most people, like I have some idea who most people are. A lot of people don't know the right buttons to push, or they think they know, and they're some of the wrong buttons.
Or they
That's
think that there
definitely a
are
thing.
right buttons. I think that's a bigger thing, right? There are no
Yeah,
right buttons in lineup HQ, right?
right. Or yeah, people want a magic potion that it's as simple as you hit these 2 buttons
Right.
and do this. Yeah, it's um, and that's again, I guess I'll go back to this is why I think an article is still relevant. Like a lot of people are just not to where you are of understanding how to use it, and
Shouldn't we
I can
educate?
kind
What
of
shouldn't we
explain
be
things,
educating them?
and we are.
That's what we try to do.
Yes, and you've been trying to do it for at least several years, and most people do not get it.
Well,
Again,
that's
with my most people.
Dave. Isn't that the beauty? Don't we get the best of both worlds? I'm teaching you everything that I know, 100% transparently, and I know that 95% of people still can't fucking do it.
Yeah,
Right? It's like am I really giving away that much edge by literally explaining something that for some fucking reason, like this is why I say that you say I'm a nice guy, but you don't know what's going on inside my head. I sometimes I
I
get
don't remember saying you're a nice guy.
you said it
You're putting
earlier
words in my
today.
mouth.
Or nicer. You use the nicer,
Nicer,
like nicer.
exactly.
But to me, it gets frustrating to like to see to try to teach and see people just like dude, how do you not get this? Like how many times can how many different ways can I explain this? Like I try to make it so that like it's like there's no correct like once I start saying there's no correct answer, there's no there's no magic button, there's no play whoever you want. Do you think it just gets so abstract that people are just like fuck it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and again, I think it goes back to it's one thing to kind of understand it, but a whole other thing when you're actually clicking the button with the money on it to be like, I know that I don't know what it's hard. It's harder to do when you're actually doing it. And most people, I don't know how many times I've said most people. I have no idea how many people.
Right. But you have no problem. But how do you get to that point though? You had to get to that point, right?
Yeah. That's okay. That's the big question that I need to have a grand answer to. How do you get to that point?
Well, how did you?
Because
I mean, I'd like
for
that's
sure, it took me a really long time. Um, okay. I actually have an answer. I think the breaking point for me, breaking in the good way, was that I got really good at esports by doing this.
oh, because esports is like the most correlative fucking sport there is.
And I don't even know what game they're playing. Literally, I don't know what game they are playing, and I'm really good at it. So that's what took me over the edge of not only do I not understand, I don't even want to understand. I think they're playing a game where they shoot somebody, but I'm not sure. That was sort of that was where the pandemic was good to me.
Oh, so
I had no,
this is fairly recently then.
yeah. Oh, this is in the last year.
Okay, so once
Uh,
you started playing esport, once you started playing League of Legends and realized that the correlation coefficient between the players is like 0.9 and above, like dude, if you're not stacking, you can't possibly win. And then once you have these, then you have the concepts of like once you're on like a 2 or 3 game slate, that it getting how to find unique lineups that also and people are overstacking the favorites. And look, I'm explaining this. I've not played a League of Legends slate yet. From a game theory perspective, League of Legends DFS is probably the easiest way to see what game theory
it is.
is
It definitely
at
is.
the
Yeah.
most extreme level. And then once you take those concepts and then kind of be able to now expand it to elsewhere. So you would think so that's what did it for you.
Yeah, I mean, so and I was there in baseball before, but it helped me a lot to see it in another sport and figure and kind of understand how people don't get it in baseball and maybe how they can get there. Like you just have to be okay to admit the I don't know, get down to what you do know, and then say, but I don't know whether Tatis or Seager are better. I don't, and it's fine. I'm not trying to figure it out. Um, just it
So
is what it is.
you're not weighing the differences between the mid laners.
Yeah,
And I don't even know what a mid laner is. I'm assuming they
I don't
fight.
either, but I know it's a thing.
Right.
I know I have one
I'm
on my
assuming they're
side.
fighting. They're shooting from the middle or something.
I assume if they shoot, I don't know.
Right. But that highlights the fact, like, if you're a good like, I'll always tell people, like, there's not a coincidence that the best DFS players seem to be the best DFS players in like every sport that they play, and maybe it's not due to the fact that they know the sports. And you're sitting here as someone that knows way more about baseball than I ever will. Yet you played League of Legends DFS, and it's like I have no idea what the hell's going on. Yet I can make a lot of money just playing the game better than other people.
Yes, it's interesting to say the least.
But you're not going to win $1 million in League of Legends DFS.
No, you're not.
Well, you can't get. Well, hold on. Don't they do now on DraftKings, like if you win, like you go to like the Tournament of Champions thing?
I don't know. Does League of Legends have
Petty Theft? I think he won a League of Legends thing in order to qualify for the Tournament of Champions that he did win the $1 million on.
Well, there you go. You can win $1 million playing League of Legends.
Right.
So, and you know that's more like projection wise. That's a totally different thing. But as far as the concept of DFS, like you always say, that's an interesting way to look at it. You can play a sport or a sport, and it's a sport now. You can play a game you don't understand and play it with the right concepts and do well. Like I said at the beginning, the first 5 years I played MLB DFS, I didn't understand. I mean, I understood it, but I didn't think that I needed to know. Like, I just knew the best plays. I would just play them. I didn't understand how to figure out at what point I should stop playing a guy based on ownership. Once you get to that point, I still think there's value. The reason I do the article, other than that I enjoy it, I can still break down things and get to things that, because the projections are nonsense, that they're not in there, and they'll never be in there because they don't exist. And I can narrow things down so we can make decisions out of this pool of things to decide on.
But at that point, even if you get to that point, like if you just whatever combination of those things are, like do whatever you want.
Yeah. Once you get to that point, you definitely need to do everything you're saying of like, you can't just play all of this guy because he's projected for 2 points more than this guy.
I mean, you can. It's just that it's high. It's just high risk.
It's nonsense.
Right. But I mean, you have to embrace the fact that like you may be playing a team just for the sake of just like what I played the Tigers the other day, and it's like why'd you play? And Mazzara hit a home run, and like he was none owned. And I'm like, great. I hope these Tiger stacks go off. And so I was like, why the fuck did you play the Tigers? I go, well, because Savali was going to be owned. And they go, well, why else would you play it? I mean, like that's the only reason I need. Is he going to be a 30% owned pitcher? Is he an ace? I don't consider him an ace. The Tigers suck, but no one's going to play them, right? I mean, like Like what baseball stats were there? Like just like no, I have no idea. Some dude hits a home run I never even heard of, right? You know, I have two Cast. I'm looking at league the MLB TV. I don't know which fucking Castro I have in the fucking stack because they have two Castros. Is it Willie Castro? Is it Harold Castro? I have no idea. Just I hope the Tigers do something today. Uh,
It's always Willie. It's got to be Willie. But yes, your point is correct.
Right, or
Well
Victor,
taken.
they have two Reyeses in the lineup or something. I have no idea what goes on with it. Then Miggy hits a home run, and they have two first basemen. You don't have the right first baseman. Last thing on FanDuel, uh, are you making any adjustments for the fact that there's now multiple positional eligibility there?
It's interesting, and it's like it's so new. I've been doing. I mean, we're 4 days old now. It's basically just giving you more ways to build whatever. Like if you're stacking a team, you now have more different ways to do it. Like you were kind of boxed in last year to, you can't play. You literally can't play these three guys together, even though you want to. So I wouldn't say anything's really changed other than it's just opened more options within stacking.
So you're still more inclined to just 4-4 it, or do you because my concern, it's not a concern, it's that because on DraftKings guys could only fit into two spots at most. They have more multiple positional guys, second base shortstop guys, first base outfield guys, so you can fit into two spots. But FanDuel already had the utility, so now that they add some MPE to some of these players, they can fit into three spots. To me, for large field GPPs, that makes it more likely that someone will have closer to the nut lineup because the one-off guy that hits 40 points can be in more lineups because of multiple positional eligibility.
So I'm not like, depending on how much I'm spending on pitcher, I'm not doing all 4-4s on FanDuel because I don't want what I don't want to do there because of just the way the salaries work out. It's just easier to get better lineups most days. Like I'm not going to put usually, Harold Castro in a Tiger stack if I can afford Mike Trout. Like that's kind of where that's an actual decision on FanDuel some days, whereas that's not going to be a decision on DraftKings. So I'm not like 4-4ing at all costs.
Right, but I mean,
FanDuel.
But with the multiple position eligibility, wouldn't you be more inclined to do the 4-3-1s? To have that one spot only because like obviously in the case that you just said, but also due to the fact that guys can fit into three spots now, that you want to give yourself more opportunities. That if there's a guy that hits 3 home runs, it's very similar to what I say on DraftKings with the 3 outfielder spots, that I'm less inclined to have my stack encompass all 3 outfielders because there's so many more outfielders on a slate. You have a 12-game slate, 24 teams, 3 outfielders plus per team, that in a large field GPP, because they could fit in so many spots, that, if Franmil Reyes hits 3 home runs, like, even though you may not have Indian stacks, like he at 8% owned, he'll probably be a one-off in the winning lineup, like because of the outfield spot. Yet at the shortstop spot, like if Tatis puts up 28 and Seager puts up 22, like it doesn't matter. They can only fit in that spot. Like as long as you have like the highest score, like if 2 shortstops hit a lot, like you can't have both. On FanDuel, you can have both. So to me, I think it makes me more likely to play like a 4-2-1-1 types of lineups on FanDuel more so now than on DraftKings, where like it's very rare for me to not play a 5-man stack.
Yeah, so far again, I mean, I'm 4 days into the season. I don't know fully where I'm going on FanDuel, but I've had at least one 4-man stack. But as far as the secondary stack, I've had everything from just 4 one-offs to 4-3-1 and 4-2-2.
But I mean, that's what I've been. I mean, I'm just telling you, that's what I've been. That's why typically I'm a DraftKings guy, but like on FanDuel, because DraftKings now has these $15, $18 large field GPPs. It's like to play 100 lineups, like it's just, get out of here. Like I'd rather just play single entry stuff and whatever. But on FanDuel they have the $3 one, and I know the payout structure is fucking stupid, but like I just wanted to experiment. I like in the beginning of the season, it's like I want to play 100, I want to play 150 lineups. and see constructions, but especially with this MPE of like, is there any demonstrable change in strategy? Because I don't think there's going to be a dramatic, but I have to assume that people aren't going to be building the same way that they've always been building, and I just want to see if there's something. Download a CSV and see, are certain guys more owned or less owned because they could be fitting the lineups together, and can that be exploited? So like yesterday in the Sunday slate, I played lineups that left 4,000 on the table just to get correlation because the pricing was so soft. So I'm like, a lot of people that use optimizers or they're hand building are like, why, like you said, why are they going to have Willie Castro or Harold Castro or whoever when they could fit Mike Trout there? And I'm like, well, I'm relying on the fact that that's what they're going to do, and I'm going to play the 4-4 and leave 3,000 on the table, and see how many lineups there are like that. And
Yeah.
if that's exploitable, because in NBA it's the same way. NBA FanDuel pricing is so soft that like you rarely have to play these kind of like fringish guys, and you could build a lineup then leave 2,000 on the table and win a GPP in NBA in FanDuel. And to me, I'm exploit that same thing, that user software thing. If so many people are going to use optimizers wrong, why don't I just exploit the fact that people are using, right? There are plenty of people that put the max on and they don't spend anything under the max. And it's
Yeah.
like, dude, you can't make stacks if you're forcing in. Like if a pitcher is only 200 difference, it's like, I guess you can't get Indian stacks because it doesn't spend 50,000. It has to spend 49.9. It's like, dude, you don't have to get to that point. So to me, that's a software user error type of thing. So that's what I'm hoping for in FanDuel.
Yeah.
Is there some type of thing that people are going to be using optimizers and it's going to be forcing these types of things, and then I could find a way to exploit, because we see that with the goofy players, right? We mentioned the goofy players before. Some 2,000 Andrew Vaughn the other day or whatever, like the
Right.
2K guy, which is fine. Cash games go for it, but I mean, like if you're blindly using an optimizer and not setting any type of exposures or anything, like that guy's going to be super fucking owned, only because people are just not. They're just, I'm going to press the button and whatever it gives me, it gives me. Uh, do you think it's bad for me to try to teach people how to use software and then try to exploit how they exactly use the software?
No comment.
Well, I'm trying to
I'll
teach
say,
them the right way,
yeah,
but I'm trying to exploit the people that use it the wrong way.
yeah. I think that's totally fair. And on the FanDuel thing, like I'm with you completely. I don't know yet
Right, me
what
neither.
but yeah, I think it's worth keeping an eye on and seeing how it ends up this year. But yeah, at this point, um, I'm not sure yet. I just know that I've been doing a 4-man stack with everything from a 1 to a 4.
Okay, doke. And you're playing on both sides, right?
Yes.
150 on both sides?
Um, it depends on when I'm on crunch time, I usually can't do 150 on both because I kind of run out of time
Right.
close to lock.
But at least in baseball, it's better than basketball.
Yeah, it's doable.
Right. Basketball, it's almost impossible.
Right.
Are you sick of basketball? I mean, you don't play that much NBA.
No, I play hockey mostly, so I really only play NBA on the days where hockey is either doesn't have a slate or just has a couple games.
It seems like
So
you're a big fan of correlation.
uh, yeah, those sports are my better sports
Right.
for sure.
Baseball, hockey, and League of Legends are like
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
football. Like, and then you got football, right? It's correlation.
Yeah. I'm okay. I don't know football. I don't know. I love football. I have no idea. I'm not particularly. I don't think anyone is as much good or bad at NFL DFS, but correlation wise, yeah, it's somewhere in the middle.
So correlation isn't nonsense then.
No,
Projections
that's a
are
real thing.
nonsense, but correlation
Correct.
isn't.
Projections are nonsense. Correlation is not nonsense.
Okay.
Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
Dave Potts 2 on Twitter. Is there a reason that you haven't switched your Twitter name to keep on brand and just be Cheese is Good?
I don't even know how you do that.
Because you don't even know how to do it.
I am from the past. I think
From
it's
the
amazing
past,
I even have a Twitter account.
right? Where's the name come from? Cheese is good.
So people assume I like cheese. I actually do not like cheese. I eat cheese on very few things. Pretty much pizza is it. Um, Before DFS, I was a musician. I think you were a comedian. I was a musician, kind of similar weird lifestyles. So I write like folk music, and I had a guy from a college newspaper review one of my CDs. And my music is aimed not so much towards the college crowd. It's a little more old people music. And the kid said something in the review like, some of these songs are kind of cheesy, but sometimes cheese is good. And that was like the same week that I created my FanDuel account. And it was just in my head. I was like, that's kind of funny.
They just thought that's your username. Fuck it. Cheese is
Yeah.
good.
And I had no idea, like pretty much everyone who's in the content space now, I had no clue at the time that that would one day be my name to the world, or it would be something different.
Right. Because most people call you cheese.
Yeah. Yeah. And I truly do not like cheese. Cheese is not good.
Well, people call me blender.
Yeah.
Right.
Blenders are good if you need. How else do you make a smoothie?
Right. Blender and cheese did they go together? But if you could change, but shouldn't you want to keep on brand and cheese is good? Cheese is good everywhere.
Maybe if I really wanted to be branding, I kind of hate Twitter so much. I don't really want to be a Twitter personality at all.
Delete it. Delete Twitter.
But I'm somewhere in the middle. Like I have a different name. I don't tweet very often, but sometimes I have things to say that are so funny I have to say them to somebody.
You put them in your article though.
Yeah, but when it's not baseball season, I'm out of options.
Oh, so did you write League of Legends articles?
Maybe one day.
Right. Well, yeah, you'd actually have to know what they do. You have to know.
Yeah, I would have to figure out what the game is.
Right, you have to figure out exactly.
There's something called a Baron. I don't know what that means.
Well, thanks for coming on, and as usual, we'll both be playing in the same contest. So I wish you the worst of luck.
Absolutely.
Right. So but if I don't win, you could win. Like that. That's,
we'll trade. It's
right.
fine.
No, well, I mean, you're playing 150 lineups, and I'm playing 150 lineups. I'm rooting for you to come in 151st place.
Fair enough.
Because I don't want you to come in above any of my lineups.
That
That's
would be
what it should be, right?
Yes.
Right. You're on crunch time wishing people good luck. I'm like, God, if you're in my contest, I don't want you to have good luck. I want you to have bad luck. Okay.
Such a nice guy, as we've said.
Right. What? I'm truthful at least. Most people won't say that.
Correct. And they should.
Dave, if you're playing the draft, you're playing today. So whatever, 8-game slate or whatever it is today. You're playing 150 lineups on DraftKings. You're playing 150 lineups on FanDuel. Who do you want to win?
Anyone.
No, you want yourself to win. Of course you do.
I root for everyone.
You can't. Everyone can't win.
But someone must, and I will be so happy for them.
Even if you don't know who they are?
Especially then.
Oh, so
I can pretend like they're nice.
So you're too nice for this. It's supposed to be cutthroat. Or lineups are supposed to be battling against each other.
Yes, we will fight.
Right. I'm not going to know who's in half my lineups, but they'll be fighting. Okay. Dave Potts, Cheese is Good. You could get his premium article over at Roto-Grinders with a premium subscription, and tweet at him at Dave Potts too, just to make sure that he checks his Twitter every once in a while, even though he hates it.
I'll see it.
You'll see it. And then you could always get the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.